All right, so we're going to talk a little bit now about hypothesis tests for means. Now, in this chapter, we are only talking about single sample hypothesis tests, whether for means or proportions. But for next chapter, 2 sample problems, right? But for now, 1 sample. Now we're going to look at means in particular. All right, so if we're going to start like we did with proportions. We're going to say, hey, what are the conditions for inference? And we want to always try to remember to check conditions, okay? So for means, we need a random sample, right? Doesn't have to be a simple random sample, but it needs to be random, selected in a proper manner, not a voluntary response sample, not a convenience sample, right? Stratified random sample, okay. Systematic random sample, but usually simple random sample. We need to know that our population is normally distributed or have a sample size of at least 30. Some books will say 40, but not others. Some books will say 30, some will say 40. We're going to use 30, okay? Now, we should know the population standard deviation, sigma, right? Remember that's what this is, population standard deviation. And if that's known, then we're going to use a z-test. If it is not known, we're going to get back to that. If sigma not known, we're going to use t-test, just like we did with confidence intervals for means. Very simple decision for us, right? So long as it's random sample, normal population, or a big enough sample size, at least 30, we're either using a z-test if we know the population standard deviation, or a t-test if we don't. Okay. So now I'm going to repeat myself because this is really important, right? This honestly is about the only thing you might seriously mess up on your hypothesis tests, right? So same thing as we had with confidence intervals, we have a decision to make when we know we're working with means. Do we use a z-test or do we use a t-test, right? A z-hypothesis test for means or a t-hypothesis test for means. And so after you know you're working with means, that's your first question, you're going to ask the second question, do I know the population standard deviation? Remember, that is sigma. If the answer to that question is yes, we're going to use z. If the answer is no, we're going to use t for Thomas, right? And of course, these are assuming random sample and that our sample is big enough or a normal population. Okay, now we got an example. Next video.